Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Kaylyn Brown,
And I am Jai Williams.
and we were assigned the communication accommodation theory. So, yeah. Communication accommodation theory is also known as CAT. Um, on these pictures, they're cats, but not that kind of cat.
Okay, so the examples of CAT are using slang to fit in with peers, emotionally accommodating to a peer or a partner, as if let's say a partner is feeling down, then you would emotionally accommodate by coming down to their level if you were at a high energy, dressing like a group you idolize or want to fit into, such as cosplay, or changing your speech to match the professionalism of your boss, like many of us do at work.
So, a quick fact about um, communication accommodation theory is that when it was introduced in 1971, the theory was first known as speech accommodation theory.
So, what is the communication accommodation theory? Also known as CAT, it is a speech accommodation theory that explains how someone accommodates and changes the way they communicate when interacting with others, such as when you're at work, how you would kind of code switch when you're interacting with a boss rather than a coworker, or if you are at school, how you would communicate differently with your friends rather than you would a teacher or a person of staff.
The influences, principles, and components of uh, communication accommodation theory is that when in small groups, we will notice how there are similarities and differences in the way we speak and behave. The way we speak and behave have a lot to do with our backgrounds. For example, our cultural backgrounds and experience that we've gone through throughout our lives.
So CAT was developed by a man named Howard Giles in 1971. He was a creator and founder of it, and it has been used quite a bit in different professions. We're learning about it in this class, and it is a thing that we use pretty much in our everyday lives and have been using since we could really talk and communicate with other people.
So the author, like he said, Howard Gills is a British American social analyst and a distinguished research professor of communication at the Department of Communication from University of California, Santa Barbara.
So the communication accommodation theory, also known as CAT, is a theory of communication developed by the man Howard Giles. In doing this, this helps the message sender gain approval from the receiver, increases efficiency in communication between both parties, and helps the sender maintain a positive social identity. So basically, this is speaking about how efficiently we can communicate with each other by using this method and this theory. Um, and how it would help different people interact with each other uh, depending on their mood, social status, or hierarchy in their profession or business or even just personal relationships.
So some history of Howard Giles is that he was born in Cardiff, Wales. He earned his bachelor's in psychology from Bangor University and his PhD in social psychology from the University of Bristol. Giles is known for creating the communication accommodation theory and has assorted examination interests in the space of applied intergroup communication, research and theory, sorry.
So, why was this theory developed? The communication accommodation theory was developed to control the social distinctions between the interactants, sorry. And it's basically saying that anybody who is interacting, whether they have different social status, whether they be friends in a committed relationship, bosses and employees, anything like that, this theory was made so that we could apply it to these conversations and really make sure that people, no matter their backgrounds or different circumstances, were able to communicate effectively with each other. And individuals oblige their correspondence exercises to get endorsement and to set a positive picture before they interacting. The climate where they are interfacing additionally influences the correspondence conduct.
So the communication accommodation theory is applied to different disciplines. For example, it's applied in businesses where employees use communication accommodation when dealing with customers. And you can see that they change the way they speak when dealing with customers, as well as their tone and their vocabulary. The communication accommodation theory can also be applied as a therapist when they're helping in small groups. You can also see that their vocabulary changes from when they're working as a therapist than outside of their discipline. Mhm.
So the communication accommodation theory can be applied in small groups as we are doing now in this class. Um, as we have all had, for example, when working in a group for a class assignment, we would not use the slang or vocabulary that we would use when talking to our friend groups because it was deemed unprofessional within the setting, especially in a classroom when we were face to face. We all wanted to seem professional in front of each other because we were doing our groups and we wanted to prove to each other that we could work cohesively, especially to the professor as well. The communication accommodation theory is used in small groups by our personalities and traits as well, because in a small group, usually of 4 to maybe 6 people, you have to really acknowledge all of the different personalities and the feelings that are in a group. You don't want to have like a hierarchy because this is the group and everybody wants to work efficiently to get a common goal finished. And if you don't use this theory, then it's going to be a lot of arguing, a lot of hierarchy, and a lot of friction between group members.
So there are two main strategies people use to communicate with each other. Mhm.
And one is called convergence, which is changing one's communication style to more closely resemble that of another individual. So pretty much, if you are in the face of your teacher, you're not really going to use slang or any words that you would use within your friend groups or even with family or close friends because it's that you don't really have that relationship with your teacher, even though a lot of people do eventually build that relationship with their teacher when they are talking professionally about grades or about assignments or anything, you're not really going to use slang or any words that uh, are not deemed appropriate within that setting because it's not that setting. You're not with your friends, you're not with family. You're trying to get something figured out and you want to intellectually be on the same status as the person you were talking to.
Some of the examples of convergence would be accents, choice of words, style of speech, and tone. For accents, we can see convergence when, like, for example, New Yorkers, they have a certain accent, and choice of words would be the vocabulary that we use that we wouldn't use with a certain person. For example, a teacher, you wouldn't talk to them with certain vocabulary that you would with your friends. Style of speech would be referred to slang. So also like choice of words that you wouldn't use when speaking to someone like your teacher than your friends. And then tone, this is an example of convergence because when in a conversation with a group, you wouldn't use a certain tone that you would anywhere else.
So divergence is a technique for separating oneself from another person by emphasizing the distinctions between you and them. So this is very different than convergence. because in convergence you are trying to be like the person you're talking to or be within the same social status or kind of emulate the person you're talking to. But with the divergence, you're really honing in on the differences between you and that person. Let's say a boss and an employee that just got hired. The boss isn't going to speak to the employee the same way they would speak to another person in their standing, for example, another manager or a store manager, or even their boss. They're not going to talk to the employee the same way because they're not on the same field or the same um, level plane. And that's really the technique of divergence. That's kind of pinpointing the differences between you and the person you're talking to, just because that exists, whether it be through um, really like accolades within a career or even a teacher to a student. The student isn't going to know as much as the teacher is. So when the teacher is, um, let's say, interacting with the student, they're not going to speak the same way they would speak to the another teacher or a principal because they're not the same people or even on the same plane intellectually.
So some of the examples of divergence would be over accommodation. Over accommodation is when a person goes out of their way to belittle someone when talking to them in which they're communicating with. For example, like he said, a manager wouldn't speak to another manager that way. They would speak probably a new hire or maybe. And self-handicapping, it's most commonly used with older people, which, for example, they would say something like back in my day, or um, give an example from their experience. And then maintenance, which is also known as under accommodation. This is where the person is persistent in the original communication style. So basically, it's the whole concept of divergence.
So in general, the accommodation theory for convergence, it decreases the social distance between people, just like a friend would speak to a friend, or an upper middle class speaker may tone down their RP accent whilst in the presence of working class people, just so that the working class people don't really think of the upper middle class speaker as someone above them, or even that the upper class or the upper middle class speaker is looking down on them while in the presence of those people. A speaker with a strong local regional accent may conform more towards RP when being interviewed for a job or a promotion, which would be upward convergence. Research suggests that people are status conscious and more likely to adopt speech styles in keeping with upward convergence.
So that's the end of our presentation. In conclusion, I would say that communication accommodation theory is well used today, especially in small groups. Not even just small groups, but in general, everyone uses it when speaking to someone that they don't usually speak to on a daily, like they would with their friends. And this was something that I didn't really know was a theory. I just thought it was like something regular we do every day. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The communication theory, it's sort of in the same category as code switching. It's something that pretty much everyone does every day in the faces of people they interact with, but it's not something they may realize that they're doing, or even know is a term in communication. And I believe that this accommodation theory is very important in communication and speech, especially when coming into contact with people of other ethnicities, races, or even backgrounds. It's very important that we can come together within our communication and have a way that we can kind of be on the same playing field, even if we don't really know each other that much. Um, and it's definitely something I'm surprised that it was made a term in 1971. That seems kind of late, especially because of the differences in backgrounds that a lot of people have. Um, it seems like it should have been a term a lot earlier because I feel like we've been doing it for a very long time. But it is very important in communication and speech, especially in today's climate with so many different backgrounds and people interacting with each other on a day-to-day basis. It is a very important thing to look at and to be aware of when you are communicating with other people.
So that's the end of our presentation. And thank you, Jai, for being a great partner. And
Same to you, because we were supposed to have a lot more people, but
yes,
we're
so
managing.
there's only two of us, so please bear with us.